Recording in progress. All righty. Are you ready, Joanne?
I am. Are you ready, Yvonne?
I am. I'm so excited to have
Yay.
this conversation. Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Freedom Seeker Show, where we delve into the challenges and triumphs of midlife with our guest, Joanne Nueduck, CEO and podcast host of Fabulous at 50 and founder of Fabulous Health. A registered nurse, speaker, facilitator, and integrative practitioner, Joanne brings a wealth of experience in metabolic balance, belief repatterning, sound wellness, and energy medicine. I'm your host, Yvonne Winkler, certified life coach and women's wisdom guide, author, facilitator, and mental health advocate. And this is the Freedom Seeker Show, where we have unfiltered conversations that matter to you, women. I also want to acknowledge that I work and play on the unceded traditional territories of the Comox First Nation. So let's dive into today's conversation with Joanne about changing that aging narrative. Welcome, Joanne.
Well, hello. I'm so happy to be here. We've been planning this for quite a while.
We sure have. And just recently reigniting this whole thing based on our passion, both on this midlife aging gracefully journey. Exactly. And so I'm really, really excited to have this dialogue with you today. And we're going to dive really into some of how you're contributing to this conversation with your community. And I'm excited because one of the things that I've noticed entering the season of midlife is that there are just not enough conversations that are open and direct and really unfiltered. So this is why you're here, Joanne, and I'm really
Awesome.
happy. So why don't we
Yeah, no
start?
question off limit.
That's perfect. And that's exactly what unfiltered means to me. So that's really wonderful. Let's start with the community aspect of it, because I'd love to hear a little
Absolutely.
bit more, not just why it's important to you to bring community into this conversation, but also what is Fabulous at 50? Can you tell us a little bit about like how your background in nursing and your all the beautiful things you do, really? I mean, metabolic balance, believer patterning, all of these practical modalities. How did
Mhm.
that influence the Fabulous at 50 and what is it?
Okay, absolutely. It's been a bit of an evolution over this last decade, but what was wonderful is as I hit sort of my late 40s and my children were getting older, I had given up my career at the time. I was being a full-time mom, and I was like, okay, what am I doing? And so I had returned to nursing, I had returned to university, and I had been introduced to this organization that was Fabulous at 50. And I was invited to take over the Calgary chapter. I've since
Okay.
now run the whole organization when the world turned upside down during COVID. Then there was a few circumstances that it was like, can you rescue it? Can you be the one that takes over and brings it together? So if we kind of fast forward, what are we now? And it really is about a group of like-minded women coming together. And a lot of my motto is that women in midlife have a lot to share with each other and the world. And we haven't always been doing that. Women traditionally around the world have less of a voice,
Mhm.
right? And women, as they get older and get into the menopause years and so forth, have even less of a voice.
Mhm.
At least that's how many feel. In many countries, that's absolute. In some countries, not so much. But yet, women at this time can be the most powerful time period of our lives. I like to actually liken this time period of our life with adolescence,
Mhm.
right? Think of the teenagers. They have lots to say, but they also have lots going on with them. We have
Mhm.
lots to say and we have lots of wisdom. We have a unique perspective. So bringing women together, that commonality of I'm going through a transition, physical, emotional, mental capacities, and my wisdom is what we do. So Fab 50 has layers in which people can participate. So of course, when the world turned upside down, everything had to go online. So we have a really fairly big online presence. We have the podcast, which I'm so excited to be able to flip the camera around to be the one interviewing you. We have blogs going on. We have Facebook group where people can participate, and all of that is very much at an arm's length. But then if you want to come in and you want face to face, still online, because anyone from around the world, really, it's more to do with maybe your time zone. You can participate in our membership, and our membership is a weekly 1 hour call on a Tuesday evening. But we get together as a group, so there's a place to be heard, there's a place to be able to share your views and come together and really be kind of cheered on. And we have anything from self-care to talking about books to guest speakers to some movement classes. So we really have a gathering and that sense of community. So where I live in Calgary, Alberta, I do run some in-person events, and sometimes they're geared more for the social side of life. So it could be going out to the theater. It might be that we're having a Christmas or a Halloween party and just having some fun, going out to dinner. And then also a little bit more on that health and wellness side. So I might be running a sound bath for that relaxation. Or recently we put on Women's Health and Wellness Symposium.
Mm-hmm. And why do you think community is so important for most of us, but let's keep focusing on that midlife era season?
Absolutely. So as you said, humans are community-based beings. We're not really meant to live in isolation. There's often more of a sense of community.
Mm-hmm.
And so people like to know that they're not alone.
Mm-hmm.
Here's what I love about this community is I think when we're younger, it's about this person's in the corporate world and this person might be in the arts and this one might be, and so you're kind of flocking together what's going on in your work. Or you're a mom and it's like, what are your kids doing? And, are my kids doing that? There's almost even a sense of competition.
Mm-hmm.
But I find as we get into midlife, a whole bunch of things change. For one, the filter falls off,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like we start going, enough of this BS, I need to say what's really in my heart. And I'm interested in hearing about what's in your heart. We've had the wisdom. Most people have gone through some kind of illness or a struggle, or they've witnessed a friend go through that. We have aging parents happening. We have older children, and it's less about, oh, my child's doing this and your child's doing that. And it's more about, I'm going to hold your hand while you cry because of something that's going on. Or this is a really fun celebration and I'm really excited to you. So that sense of celebration about this milestone in our life, I think is really important for women to feel heard and seen.
Mm-hmm.
And also be reminded that they still have tons to share with the world. It's not a matter of, I don't know, when I meet someone and it's like, how are you doing? What are you up to? And it's like, oh, same old, same old. And I'm like, no, I'm going to give them a shake and a rattle. It's not same old, same old. This is new and exciting and uncharted territory. It's like a whole new chapter.
Mm-hmm.
And let's glow in this time period.
Yeah. Let's change the narrative on this conversation. Exactly.
Absolutely.
We have a perceived notion of what this era or this season needs to look like. And I hear you very passionately changing that narrative, right? In what all of that you said. Let's dive in a little bit more into what is this season? What is midlife? What is menopause, perimenopause? And what are some of the misconceptions or myths around that?
Absolutely.
Around this season?
We could be talking here for the whole day. So it is such an important conversation. So if we want to get into the biology first, just to sort of set the stage, is when we talk about midlife, when I talk about midlife, I'm talking kind of the late 40s, into late 60s,
Mm-hmm.
because there's a whole wide range in there. So that's why the fabulous at 50 is not just 50, but we talk about that almost like it's like this milestone. You hit 50 and it's like you get to declare fabulous from here on in. It's fabulous at 50 and beyond. And also, age 51 is the average age for North American women. I say that because different countries have slightly different statistics. Is the average age that women go into menopause, have menopause. So explain briefly what that is. So I believe most of us, we understand how we have been menstruating throughout our lives, right? We've had our periods, we've been fertile, we've been dropping an egg or two every month, and we get our periods. And so there's a very orchestrated dance of our hormones, right? When estrogen is up and then progesterone is up, and it goes up and down, and it's this beautiful rhythm. Then we had perimenopause. And at my event recently, which is going to be available online, people are going to be able to order it that way. My partner in crime, as we say, my co-host at the time, we put on a really funny play about perimenopause, her trying to sleep. And I was this most annoying kind of like, hi, I'm Peri. And I just went through talking about it. It was so funny. I got inspired by something I several things I'd seen on the internet, and I went, I have to do something like this. Yeah. And so that's a little sneak preview. What happens in perimenopause is that the hormones start to shift and the eggs start popping out not as regularly. It's like one goes out early and one goes out late, or like a couple go out at once. That's why there's a higher chance the older you get of having twins or multiples. What happens is your hormones start going a little haywire, right? You start getting dips in the progesterone and spikes in the estrogen, and they're up and down. Here's where there's misconceptions. Women might be like 41 and they're not even knowing that this is the menopause journey starting for them. They're just having a bunch of issues. Perimenopause can be anywhere from like 2 to 10 years before going through full menopause, which is the stop. So if we have the haywire hormones as perimenopause, at some point in time, periods get fewer and farther between, and they just stop. And you're still in perimenopause until you've counted 12 months. And then that day, 12 months after your last period, is menopause. Mm-hmm. And then everything after that, we refer to as postmenopause. Mm-hmm. Once you're in postmenopause, that is when hormones drop way down. The issues you have in postmenopause are actually different than perimenopause. There's overlap, but there's differences, right? Because you're not having the up and down spikes. Now you're just having like estrogen gets up and walks out the door and she slams it in your face. And then we have a whole host of issues. Mm-hmm. And what I am personally finding is that a lot of the clients that are coming to me now are more like 60. Because they're kind of going, I didn't really have a problem. I breezed through menopause. And I go, I hate to remind you, but you're in menopause. Your menses has paused. Yeah. And what they're not realizing is that there is some really significant health risks, that the risk goes up when our estrogen goes down. And so this menopause journey is a bit of a wake-up call, because it doesn't have to be horrible. Yes. But we need to step up and start. We can't be doing what we were doing when we were 30. We don't take care of our body in the same way. And when women get a little annoyed with that, I just go, well, you didn't take care of your body at 8 years old the same way you did at 15 years old. And our bodies now need taking care of differently.
Exactly. And so can you give us some practical tips then on some of the things that remedies, let's call them, or maybe let's start with, what are some of the things that you might notice?
Sure.
And then we'll talk about some of the things that you suggest.
Yeah. So again, in this event we did, I had a page with like 30 different symptoms. So things include, most people know, they think of menopause, we think of hot flashes. Really what happens is our hormones impact all of the different systems in our body. So hot flashes are one of the most visible signs or noticeable signs because you literally feel like you're burning from the inside out. You might break out in a night sweat. They can be quite debilitating because you're having to change all your clothes. What's interesting is you can also have the opposite. I had cold
Mm-hmm.
flashes, and I would feel like ice is running through my system. So it's that your heating temperature is thrown out of whack because hormones are shooting up and down. Other issues that start to happen is some of the mood swings, some of the irritability that's going on, changes to your hair, changes to your
Mm-hmm.
skin. Basically, everything starts to dry out. And I mean everything, your
Everything.
eyeballs, your vagina, let's just talk
Mm-hmm.
about that. Well,
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the most upsetting symptoms that women are not talking about. Like when
Yes.
people say, "Oh yeah, we're having conversations," but they're talking about their hot sweats, but they're not talking about their sexual health,
Yes.
their vaginas. They start to get irritated and dry,
Yep.
and it's a lack of estrogen. It's
Mm-hmm.
changes in estrogen, and we can talk about briefly that can be addressed. You can have weird symptoms like itchy ears
Mm-hmm.
and vertigo. There's different types of vertigo, but often the vertigo where, because of the dryness too, the crystals in our ears start to dry out, and that's part of our balance system, our vestibular system. Women can be experiencing issues with their muscles. Frozen shoulder. How many women have had issues and they gone to the doctor and they're doing frozen shoulder? It can be a very common sign of menopause. Heart palpitations. This was something that really impacted me as well, racing heart. So they go to the doctor. Oh, well, you're having anxiety. Here, take some Ativan.
Mm-hmm.
Here's some anti-anxiety. Depression.
Mm-hmm.
Women's rates of depression significantly go up when women are in menopause.
Mm-hmm.
And there's several incredible doctors that I follow, menopause specialists, and her comment is a lot of depression that happens in menopause or postmenopause, she believes is related to the hormone levels. And so let's get
Mm-hmm.
to the root cause.
Mm-hmm.
It's not saying that antidepressants are bad. They
No.
are incredible for when they're needed. But if they're, I believe there's so much we can do around diet and exercise and everything else first. So there's definitely, as you get further into menopause, like a postmenopause, there is an increase in neurological issues, so think dementia. There is an increase in cardiovascular, so think heart attacks and strokes. There is an increased risk of musculoskeletal systems. Our muscle mass starts rapidly dropping off. For someone about 25%, it's very significant. So think of frailty as we get older. I say it's a bit of a wake up call for women in midlife to go, what am I doing to set myself up to be healthy now and in the future?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
even the women that are kind of like, oh, I'm breezing through it, I didn't have hot flashes. It's like, okay, but how do you want to be when you're 70 and 80 years old? Because
Mm-hmm.
we're living longer. Do you want to be a strong enough woman that you can get on and off the toilet and maybe still live in your own home? Or do you want to be so frail that you're now having to use, some sort of depends or being taken care of in a nursing home?
Yes. Oh, I love this conversation because this is all the things that I've been researching, looking into, and talking about myself. And I really, really appreciate your medical background as a nurse
Thank you.
and the understanding of how these things work, because I think that was one of my biggest frustrations up until this point is the lack of knowledge, and specifically about my body. And so I'm really appreciating right now the experience and the wisdom and the insights that you're bringing to this table.
Thank
And
you.
being living in Canada, and I hear it across Canada with our medical crisis that we have, it is, I just want to say, it is so important that women like you who have that background and that understanding to share what it is you have to share, simply because we don't all have access to a doctor or a specialist or an expert easily, anyways, who
Yeah.
knows a thing or two about this.
I absolutely agree. And I wouldn't say like there's definitely people that are there's different degrees of people's knowledge, right? I'm very passionate about it at a certain level, certain knowledge, and we can go into things that women can be doing. What is so sad is that there is a lack of education within our healthcare providers. And
Yes.
because so much of what I've learned about menopause has been because I've been going through it in my own journey and I've been
Yeah.
studying it. It wasn't necessarily what I'd learned formally.
Right.
But every healthcare professional has an obligation to continue learning, right?
Right.
Once you kind of get your certificate and fly, little birdie, you're out the door. There isn't enough core education at the
Hmm.
core level
Hmm.
for doctors and nurses and everybody and
Hmm.
respiratory techs. Like when you think about it, 51% of the population are female.
Hmm.
And 100% of females, if they live
Hmm.
long enough, will go through menopause.
Hmm.
At any given time, 25% of the population is in menopause.
Yeah.
Yet, so many hours is spent on all these other conditions that not nearly as many people are going to go through.
No, exactly. Yeah.
And so, what I love is there's some really cool menopause specialist female doctors out
Hmm.
there
Hmm.
that are going through menopause themselves
Yes.
and are now going, holy smokes. And there's a way more, they're advocating
Yeah.
for better education because what's happening is because we've been ignoring the impact of menopause on women, they've been getting a lot of health issues
Hmm.
that then need treatments and pharmaceuticals and surgeries
Yeah.
to take care
That
of.
could have been prevented.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the
Yeah.
part that just drives me bonkers. I am
Yes.
so much about let's get to the basics because this is what I went through.
Right.
I can't tell you how many times I was rushed to the hospital
Mm.
with cardiac issues. Some of it was I actually had an issue as well, but they still didn't really find out. Not even once did they really go, I wonder if your hormones are actually worsening this. Nobody was looking at that. I'm like,
No.
come on, people. I come from the medical system. We need to do better.
So let's talk about some of those basics. What are some of the things that you say we can notice what to pay attention to that might be a contribution to this shift in our body, physical? And what are some of the things that
We
we
can do.
can do without having to go and see a doctor per se?
There's well, so much of it is lifestyle.
Hmm.
So much, and I don't want to say like, oh, the lifestyle you're living, but it is basically everyday caring for yourself choices that
Hmm.
can change. So one of the core things is how do we fuel our body? How are we breathing? Are we breathing in a way that's causing us anxiety? Are we breathing in a way that calms us down? So I'm going through the order because, like, if we don't have
Love
options
it.
very
I
well,
love it. Yeah.
the next one
How do
is
we fuel our body?
water. How are we fueling our body? Basically, how are we breathing? What water are we putting into us? And what are we eating? Unfortunately, there is so much contradictory information out there about eat this, don't eat that. I'm very much about get back to the basics. Make sure that whatever you're following, if you're really having issues, make sure that it's bio individual for you. It's nice that somebody says, these are the ideal foods, which can be, you can follow that. But if you're really having some issues, there are ways. Like the metabolic balance plan that I worked, it was designed by a German cardiologist. It was to help the sickest of the sickest. So if you're already having insulin resistance, diabetes, metabolic syndrome, high blood pressure, you're in a metabolic, you likely have what we call metabolic syndrome. So changing what we eat. For so long, it's like, I don't know, just the medical system is like, oh yeah, eat whatever, eat a healthy diet. But it's so hard. There's so many pressures out there from food, and they put so much sugar and salt, and there's so many hormone disruptors out there. Like it's kind of crazy. So if you're not necessarily in a program, what you can do is go back, think of your grandparents. What did they eat? They ate sort of farm to table eating. So cook from scratch, have half your plate vegetables, a quarter of it a protein source that you enjoy, and another quarter that's, like a healthier starchy carb, fruit, whole grains, like potato, literally just cook from scratch yourself, and that is going to get you going. But there's lots of different programs, and there is certain ways to eat for women in midlife. And one of the single biggest ones, if you want to put this down, is we need way more protein than we think we do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The recommendations is between 20 to 30 grams of protein per meal.
Yes.
There's way more protein than we
Yeah.
think. Exercise,
Mm.
huge. Not just, we need to stop the younger version of many of us of we want to be thin.
Yeah.
Change the, you know how we talk about that, change that aging narrative, change, flip that brain. It's we want to be strong.
Yeah.
So kind of in essence, throw away your scale. You want to be strong.
Throw
And
away your scale. Yes,
yes,
absolutely.
like, well, for some, I use a specific scale that gives me more feedback on stuff. I want to know what is your, not so much how much extra weight are you carrying in the chubby fat, like your subcutaneous fat, but what's going on in your belly with your visceral fat. If you want to know if you're going into insulin resistance, which really happens once have low estrogen,
Mm-hmm.
take the measurement of your waist. If it's above 35 inches, you are likely in insulin resistance and you likely have basically visceral fat, which can be dangerous to your health. It's
Yeah.
metabolically active. It's what contributes to cardiac issues. It throws everything out of whack.
Yeah. Because
But
it's the fat that's around the organs at that
that's
point,
right.
right?
The visceral fat is under the muscles.
Yeah.
The other way to look at is what is your waist to hip ratio, right? You want to have a smaller waist than you do a hip.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't, you are in the higher risk range for cardiovascular issues.
Mm-hmm.
So again, you want to get that under control. There's a way of eating to get that down, and a lot of it is making sure you're getting enough protein and exercising. So we want to exercise. We want to use weights. We want to be lifting heavier. It's
Mm-hmm.
not just the repetition and keeping small. We want to build up our muscle. So we
Yeah.
want to do that in a safe way, and we want to keep our active. So we don't have to be out running. We don't have to be doing major, like sweaty, long hour workouts because most of us don't want that. We get injured for it, but get out and walk and be lifting weights,
Yeah.
right? You should be able to, like, at least doing body weight resistance.
And it also helps, like the exercise piece also is so good to get back into your circadian rhythm.
Absolutely.
It's
Sleeping
it's
better.
sleeping better, it's having fresh air and daylight, like actually seeing daylight, not being under the artificial light all day. And most of us sit so much now in our work,
Yes.
in our days. So having that movement, I was just calculating out, the 10,000 steps a day. So that I thought was no problem. 10,000 steps, no problem. It takes about an hour and a half to walk 10,000 steps.
Yeah.
So put it in this perspective. I was like, okay, so how can I bring out an hour and a half a day in the best possible way? And that's where I landed at the moment is like first thing in the morning and then another evening walk to wind down. So the next one is sleep.
Sleep is when our bodies rejuvenate. And so sleep is important all across the board, but it's a big conversation for women in midlife because I'm sure there's women listening going, I'm not sleeping. Like
Mm-hmm.
that was something that hugely came up at this event. And there are some really interesting ways to help sleep, but you need to get a handle on your sleep. So if you need to see someone's behavioral changes, like your habit changes on how to wind down, we need to pay attention to what they're calling sleep hygiene is really important.
Mm-hmm.
But also hormones. Like we haven't really talked about this, but almost all of this can
Mm-hmm.
be helped by women simply taking hormone replacement, which is safe. Get your hormones checked.
Yes.
And it is, find a practitioner that can help you. And unfortunately, your family doctor may or may not. They
Mm-hmm.
might be stuck with old information from like 2022, where there was a big study that was poorly reported and has been shown since. And they've even come out and said, hey, we had these people in and they were already at risk for something. They skewed the results.
Hmm.
Also, we have to look at whenever you're looking at results of something, when sometimes it's like such and such doubles your chances. And I'm going, but wait a minute, what's the actual? If
Mm-hmm.
something is a 1 out of 1 million and it goes to 2, it's doubled, but you're still 2 out of 1 million, which is outrageously small. So it's really important that we don't just look at sensationalized headlines and
Yes.
that we really do the research. There was one that was done fairly recently and it had thousands of women, and women balancing their hormones, taking a substance that your body's already used to, and they significantly reduced cardiovascular risk, neurological risks, musculoskeletal risks, genital risks, like everything across the board
Amazing.
went
Yeah.
down by replacing, and the best window of time, but not the only window of time, is in the first 10 years. So I'll
Mm-hmm.
just put that out, that it is a consideration. And so
Yes.
many women, literally, there's been like a whole generation, over 20, 25 years of women that have since been robbed of that option and are
Yeah.
to this day being denied the conversation. Not everyone wants it, but every woman should have a conversation.
I
So
love this. Can we
yeah,
just
right.
really repeat this? Because I think
Okay,
this
I'll
was
say that
such a
again.
big
Every
takeaway for
This
me
is
in,
probably the biggest one, because you
yes.
were at first asking what can we do without seeing, but you can't
Yeah,
not talk about this,
I
because
agree. Yeah.
you still need to, even if somebody's on hormone replacement, often it's referred to as HRT
Mm-hmm.
or MHT, which is menopause hormone therapy. Like there's
Mm-hmm.
all different terms out there. So we'll say the whole thing. Giving your body back the progesterone and the estrogen, and sometimes even small physiological, accurate female doses of testosterone,
Mm-hmm.
can be life changing to women.
And there is a window. I think that's the piece that is so
Well, yes and
important.
no. There is a window where it is best.
Yes.
The best window, so is some women start in perimenopause. So I took progesterone during perimenopause
Mm-hmm.
because I was having big estrogen spikes and I didn't
Mm-hmm.
have enough progesterone. So
Mm-hmm.
I took progesterone. I went off at one point, I was going to go and get a whole big panel and a testing of hormones. And I had to go off the progesterone to see where's my normal.
Right.
And then naively, I'll admit it, naively I went, oh, I'm feeling pretty good now.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't pursue that. I
Mm-hmm.
think my life would be different if I had pursued it.
Mm-hmm.
Many years later, I was starting to have some musculoskeletal issues. And I'm going, why is it that I'm doing exercises that my physio is giving me? My joints are all causing me issues. And I'm not really building muscle. I don't feel like I'm working my muscles. I'm just hurting my joints. It was like wake up call going, I'm having the effects. Like you don't feel the effects right away.
Yeah.
Once the craziness stops, sometimes women go through a bit of a lull. It's
Mm-hmm.
not till it's 5, 10, 15, 20 years, they find themselves 70 years old and their bones are mush because the estrogen depleted is their bone density changes. They're not absorbing what they need. So there's a lot of lifestyle stuff we can do. So I like to think of it almost like you have a load of something you got to carry from here to there. You can do that manually. So that's lifestyle. You still got to get it there. But if you happen to have a wheelbarrow, say that's your hormones, you can get it there easier.
Yeah.
Right? You still need to focus on your nutrition and your sleep, your water intake, but hormones, have a conversation with someone that understands hormones.
That
If you
understands it. Yeah.
walk in and someone says no, or you're not eligible at all, find somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the thing, unfortunately, within Canada and the States too, there's not enough doctors that are well enough educated. So you can be the one that educates them a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
going, can you show me the reports? Because I've done some research and the ones from 20 years ago, there's newer ones. Like, have you read these newer ones? Right.
Yes.
So there are private things that are available as well. Like there
Mm-hmm.
are functional medicine doctors, there's naturopathic doctors, there are some specifically women's clinics, there's some telehealth. So there's options. What I would say is don't give up on your options until you get
Awesome.
your answers. In the first 10 years, that is the best, most effective window. It doesn't preclude after, but afterwards, if you're already down the line of dementia, if you're already down the line of you have cardiovascular disease, you may not be eligible, or it may not be helpful. So the best is using it as preventative.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for bringing this to the Freedom Seeker audience, because that was one of my biggest takeaways as well. When I was doing some research, I was like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, like, there's so much preventative. And to your point around, we may not see the immediate effects or what not acting does to us right now.
Yeah.
And let's look at what, like, I loved your question earlier that you ask your clients, which is, how would you like to be when you are 60, 70? Like, and older? Like, what does that look like for you? Where would you like to be? And then
Exactly.
build a plan.
Because sometimes people, like we all are like, we're not thinking about what are our bones going to be like when we trip and fall. Are we going to break a hip?
Yeah.
We're just kind of like, I'm fine. Or I can stand up now. Like one of the things that's really cool it to try is put yourself on the ground. Can you get off the ground? And then I was challenged. Somebody said, can you get off the ground without using your hands? Or pretend you have one broken arm
Mm-hmm.
or something. Can you get off the ground? It's
Mm-hmm.
like we need to start thinking about that. Not once we're older. We need to think of it when we're still
Yeah.
kind of, in a sense, young and healthy.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you keep doing something, you're going to maintain it. I really believe you can start at any age. Like if you're listening to this and you're 80, it's like, yes, there's stuff you can be doing.
100%. Oh, I love this. And this wraps up so beautifully into our final wrap up here in how can we change that narrative, that aging narrative. One of the things that came up for me right away when you said that is how frustrated I was that I didn't know enough about my body, but also that some of the habits I never really got into a really good understanding of what my diet needs to look like, having a routine of physical exercise on a regular basis, things like that. And to your point, I'm so set in my ways. It is much more difficult now to change it. I feel really
All of us.
thankful that I now have at least the awareness that, and I am making changes and I'm not waiting until I'm older. That
Mhm.
said, the frustration came from, I wish I would have known a few of these things earlier. I don't know if if younger Yvonne would have listened to any of it.
Yeah,
I just wish right now that there were at least more conversations around this. And this is what
absolutely.
really is the foundation of the Freedom Seeker show, is because I was I was noticing that and observing that in many different areas of women's lives, that we just all have our isolated conversations, but we are never really talking about it in community. So full circle, bringing it back to community, bringing
Absolutely.
it back to supporting one another, bringing it back to just having conversations. And even for women who have daughters at a young age now, like say in their 20s or in their teenager age even, they hear. They may not listen or want to do anything with it or understand it even, but they hear.
Oh,
And
yeah.
that makes such a difference. So I just absolutely love this dialogue because this is part of how we can change that narrative.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that we're stepping into, let's talk a little bit more like, what does it mean to change the aging narrative? Because if I can throw back, we often think of self care as your, I don't know, going to the spa or something like that.
Mhm.
To me, those are treats, those are pampering. Self care is, what are you eating? What are you thinking about? How are you tending to your energy?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And so this is that mindset. And I know you
Mhm.
do a lot about mindset and, how
Mhm.
can you look at things in a different way? And so
Mhm.
that's what I do with, say, belief reparenting and some of that. And then energy work. I was just going to throw a really quick thing into one of the biggest things that I've got into in the last couple of years. I did before, but at a lesser degree, is for like over 10 years, one of the things that I found for stress management, because this is huge for women, is if we're not managing our stress and allowing our bodies to go into that rest and digest, right? Sympathetic nervous system is that fight or flight, which a lot of women think, well, I'm not in that. And it's going, if you're in low grade stress, you're just in low grade sympathetic nervous system. And it's so depleting to our systems.
Mhm.
We want that parasympathetic, that rest and digest. So I use sound therapy, right? So
Mhm.
people might use yoga, they might use meditation, but doing something that gets you relaxed, but also managing our energies. I do a whole talk, I've done like podcasts on it, on body, mind, spirit. So we've been mostly talking about body today, about what are we feeding it, how are we moving it, but our minds, massively important at this time of life. Do we have the itty bitty shitty committee going off? Or are we actually are we being our best coach? Are we being loving friend to ourselves? And
Mhm.
then our energies. There's so much we can do around energy work to help balance everything, right? Like, because it's all energy. That's all we
Mhm.
are, right?
Mhm.
We're all like, don't you remember going into science class and learning that this hard desk in front of us is actually still mostly air? Like it's just energy slowed right down. Like I love Einstein's comment about there is no matter. We got it wrong. Everything we call matter is just energy slowed down enough that it's perceptible.
Yeah.
And so we're just
Wow.
energy. Most people come to it with the thought of, we got to change society and we got to change the narrative of society. And I'm like, oh, guess what? We are society.
Yes.
So we need to change the aging narrative that's in our own brain. Do we think that once we hit menopause, we're done? We're washed up? Do we think that now that our kids have left home and we're in the empty nest, are we, unfortunately, we can all go through it. I'm not saying denying the feelings, but are we choosing to stay completely stuck in that? Are we, or we're going into retirement, or like, what is the aging narrative? What stories have you been told or bought into in your own brain that's going to carry you? But we live so much longer now. What am I going to do in this period of time? What is going to fill me up? So that's what I'm changing. And I can see that this is because of a conversation you and I had. This is
Mhm.
a lot of the work you've been doing lately.
100% because it starts with you. That's what I heard you say. Like we can always look outside of ourselves for the answers. And every time I've done that, it always brought me right back to the same truth. And that is, it starts within me. So, what is my own, like just watching and observing my own thoughts and beliefs around what aging looks like? It starts with the tiniest things and just observing them, not judging them, just observe them and just take note. Interesting. Where did that belief come from? Where did I learn that? Like, where did I learn that women at whatever older age are not as valuable to society? Or where did I learn that, I need to color my hair and stay youthful looking until the day I die? Like, where did I learn these things? And
Yeah.
is it true for me? I think,
And that's more important because I must admit, sometimes I it's an interesting inquiry on where did I learn it, but sometimes I set that aside. I'm like, I don't care where I learned it. It's just like, is it true for me?
Mhm.
And what do I actually want? Is it uplifting
Yeah.
me or draining me? The whole belief repatterning, that's the particular system I use that
Mhm.
developed by Suze Casey, is all about what is on the draining side and what is on the uplifting side.
Yes.
If these thoughts are draining you, then what's it pointing to help you
Right.
lift them up? And if we can bring women to a more uplifted state, we're still going to be different. We're not going to be the same as we were when, thank God we're not the same as when we were 30. I
Mhm.
am so, as I said before, it's like I want to be past where there feels like there's almost this competition, or
Mhm.
it's like we're trying to show up and it's like we're trying to be the best. Maybe people like me now, and now it's just like I'm showing up as my kindest self to myself and others, and the people that want to be around me will be naturally around me,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And so
Um,
that and I also have to, I want to give a big shout out to my grandpa who lived to 99 and a half years old. I grew up with a different sense of aging than other people, and it was interesting what we focus on, because my grandmother actually passed away with dementia at 74 years old. She was like a very wizered up old lady, but at
mhm.
74, my
Mhm.
grandfather literally lived like at 80 years old. That was when he was stripping down my bedroom furniture and refinishing it for me. That was when he was still like, he literally lived in his own home till 98 years old.
Yeah.
And so I grew up with this sense of you just keep on going.
Yeah.
Just and he used to say, he goes, I wake up every day with something to do.
So
Yeah.
that purpose, meaningfulness, something
Yes.
that
It's
keeps getting him up out of bed.
Yeah. And
Mhm.
so if we do that for ourselves, now that something to do doesn't necessarily have to be grandiose.
No.
It's the essence in us that's driving us. It might be that something to do is that your neighbor or your cousin across town just lost somebody,
Mhm.
and you want to give them a call or make them the casserole or whatever it is that what is the one thing you're going to do in the world today? Could be that you're just phoning someone up to say hi. It doesn't have to be grandiose, but we need to know that we matter in life. And maybe it is. Maybe it is you're going to sit down and write a book. It doesn't have to be a bestseller. Maybe you're writing a book so that your children and grandchildren know you better or have a story from you. It's like, just find some dream. It's never too late. I just literally on the internet, I was just watching and it was talking about this man in his 80s that took up painting and piano and all this cool stuff in his 80s. Like, why not? If there's something you want to do, just go for it.
Yeah. Why not? Yeah. Oh, I love this. Is this your final thought, or do you have something that you want to leave us with that you really want to?
I have tons of final thoughts. What I want to do is just circle back to the first one I said, because I think it sums up so much, is that women in midlife have so much to share with each other in the world. So let's share our wisdom. Let's share our heartache. Let's share our love and joy.
Thank you, Joanne.
Yeah. So wonderful to be on here. We could go on for so long. And
we will. Listen, if you're up for it, let's do this again. I think today we like really blew open a couple of different avenues we can shoot down a little closer. For those of you who would like to know more about the work you do and the community that you have with Fabulous at 50, where would we send them?
So I think the best is to go to the Fabulous at 50 website. And so that'll be, I'm sure, in your show notes, but it's Fabulous. And then the word at, like letters A, then T, the digits 50, right? It's not written out. So fabulousat50.com. And when you're there, there's a couple things. If you want to talk to me directly, you want to have a free health consultation to find out what I offer, if that makes sense. There's a little widget when you go on there. You enter your name and your mobile phone and you can text me, and it doesn't go to a robot. I don't like those. They're creepy.
No AI for Joanne.
When you text it, you can like, hi, Joanne. I'm the one that's going to read that. So I do look at it. And while you're there, just poke around. There's stuff about our membership, but there's also a free gift. You can download 21 ways to energize your life. And they're just fun tips on things you can do that just make your life a little bit more uplifted.
Oh, that sounds amazing. So thank you so much for being here, Joanne, sharing your wisdom, sharing your stories. And I also want to encourage everyone listening to go visit Joanne's website, fabulousat50.com. Share this episode. If you found value in this, share this in the spirit of what Joanne and I have been talking about, how important it is to create community and changing the narrative around aging. Share this episode with your friends and other women that are in your life that may be in that same age category right now and just scratching their head, not really knowing what's up, what's down. And share the episode, tag us, Joanne_Nueduck, that's Neweduk, and mine is Yvonne Winkler _ at the end. And we'll know that you're sharing and we're keeping the conversation going.
Absolutely. And I'm super excited to get you on my podcast as well. And we can partly continue this conversation, or I think we're going to blow open some new doors.
Yeah, we shall.
There's so many cool conversations that we can have. There's never the same old, same old. That's my last word. You wanted my absolute last word. If you find yourself saying same old, zip it and think of something that actually was wonderful that happened to you and share it with the person asking.
I think this is the perfect spot to leave it. Thank you, Joanne.
Bye everyone.
For now.